This is Questions of Life. We're looking at the church. Here is the next video. I think that's been evident over the years, but also in lockdown, in the way that we try and love and reach out to the broken and to the vulnerable, to those that are in particular struggling. You've been talking a bit about our food bank, and we've been feeding over 150 people a week, and that's increasing. And not a sense of, oh, look at us, aren't we amazing, but a sense of compassion and wanting to bless, and having received so much as a community, we want to give back into this community. And there have been some wonderful stories of people that have come amongst us, that we've sought to encourage, that we've been kind of like their cheerleaders, helping them to apply for jobs and just getting back onto their feet. And that is just such a sense of encouragement for us. But we want to be that place for us. We don't just want to be a place that is known, oh, you can come on Sunday, but you can come on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, whatever the situation in your life. We want to welcome you. We've done things like divorce recovery workshop, those that have been struggling through the breakdown of a relationship. Again, there's this sense that come as you are. Whoever's fault it is that the relationship is broken down, we're not here to judge, but we're here to love. We're here to help you just be put back together again and to find some semblance of life. And you see that across just every section of our church, that runs through our DNA. That we're not here for us. Our mission statement, tell us what our mission statement is.
So our mission statement in this particular church is making sense of life, sharing the love of Jesus. And that...
You missed that one word.
Together. Making sense of life together, sharing the love of Jesus. And that really, for us, sums up 4 key elements.
Yep.
We want to make sense of life. It's a big conviction of ours that we're relevant, that we're understandable. We try to use language of our culture, which means translating some of the biblical language into the language of our culture, that we talk about real life, that we talk about what's really facing people. So we want to make sense of life. And it's sensing too, in that statement, that life isn't easy and there are difficulties. We don't want to duck suffering. We don't want to pretend that everything's fine. We want to be genuine and have integrity. We want to make sense of life together, and this is that key word which you rightly picked up, that is about this sense of church, that it's every one of us. It's not one person with a dog collar. It's not one person in a special clothing. It's not one person who's employed by the church to do it all for us. It is all of us together. Some of us are released to work for the church, but it's all of us together. You take the example of the food bank. I wouldn't be able to do the food bank day in, day out. But there's a team of people who do, but yet we're all doing it.
Yeah.
But they're doing it, if that makes sense. My body is doing it. I just happen to be a different part of the body.
Yeah.
So we're making sense of life together. Then the third element is this idea of sharing, that we've got something to give, something to involve other people with, that we want to pass on. And what are we sharing is the fourth thing, the love of Jesus, that it's fundamental about who Jesus is, how he displayed love on the cross, how he displayed his love in a way related to people. So that means an awful lot about grace and nothing to do with judgment, because that's not how Jesus expressed himself. We're not here to judge. There is a day of judgment. We've talked about that in previous questions of life, and we'll come back to that on other occasions. But that's not our job. Our job as a church is to share the love of Jesus. And we have to do that together, and we have to reach out with the language that people understand. It's no point us shouting at a world and saying, why don't you understand us, if we're speaking a different language. We have to speak their language. Right now, that's the language of the internet. It's the language of social media. And that may be not a language that I fully understand, but it's a language we have to speak.
Picking up on that, making sense of life. You're excellent at explaining the Bible in today's language. And I just want to commend to people the series that you're doing on the book of John. John is one of the Gospels in the New Testament, kind of like eyewitness accounts of Jesus, the things that he said and he did. And you're just working your way through it. You've been doing it since we've been in lockdown. You can find those on our website, on our YouTube channel as well. Just tell us a little bit about those and where we're up to with that.
Yeah, I just wanted to give people an opportunity to draw aside for roughly 20 minutes. Sometimes it's 5 minutes less, sometimes it's 5 minutes more, and to think about what a passage of the Bible means. Maybe you do it with a pen and paper, maybe you don't. Maybe you're walking and listening to it on a podcast, whatever it is. But try and ask questions to apply to life. We're just about to enter into a famous story, which is the feeding of the 5,000.
Great.
And at the moment, it looks like I've got 4 talks coming out of that because there's so much in it. And I hope that it takes you to places where you perhaps have just not really thought about it with that story. Some just odd words, you think, let's just hone down on what he meant by that. I just believe, as we've talked about here, that Scripture is life.
Yeah.
And just sort of going back, a really interesting thing I was listening to the other day. An American sociologist who's not a Christian, he's an atheist, a very clear atheist, has written a book about happiness, and he was explaining this, and I was listening to him talking about it, and he said that he looked at what's going on in our culture and why we were so unhappy, and one of the things he looked at was the fact that so many people only ever read on social media something that is less than 3 months old. In other words, he would say that wisdom of 100 years ago or wisdom of 1,000 years ago is beyond many people's experience. They're not hearing that stuff, they don't read it. And he thought to himself, well, if we're so unhappy constantly having new ideas that nobody's ever tested and tried, what happens if I go and look at wisdom that has lasted for 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years? What would I learn from that? So he wrote a book and ideas, and he went to the religions. He went to Buddhism and Islam and Christianity and Judaism, and he's written a book of drawing from those things wisdom for happiness that he says this is past generations. And it's not a Christian book, but he points out that Jesus' wisdom has never gone away, and that it has fed people for 2,000 years. So his point was, if this has helped people for 2,000 years, chances are it's going to help my generation today, who are still only hearing what the latest YouTube celebrity person has said, who has got no idea what they're really saying. And so that's why we go back into Scripture, that it's wisdom that's lasted for years, and it's life.
And part of the church community is helping us to grow in our understanding of God, to begin to delve into Scripture and allow that to speak to us and to influence us and build us up and encourage us, and all those things we talked about when we studied the Bible. That's a key part of our community.
Absolutely. And I believe the Bible, it's foundational for us, whether we're Christians, whether we're atheists, whether we believe in God, whether we don't. The Bible will bring life.
Now, one of the things you do with the Bible, particularly when we have the opportunity to gather together on a Sunday, is you work your way systematically through it. So you don't rock up on a Sunday thinking, right, what do these people really need to hear from me? It's never your agenda that sets what you're going to speak on. It's always the next bit in the passage. And I find that really encouraging. I mean, I don't do that. I just, preach on my favourite passages, and that's fantastic. But you're good. And it reminds me that sometimes my experiences of church and other people's experiences of church haven't been that the preacher or those there don't have an agenda. And you've talked about it not being a club, not about it just being for the Christians. But I suspect there are people that are watching this. I expect their experience hasn't always been that great going to church. I know I went to church a few years ago. Wasn't round here, because obviously this is my church. And the way that I'm dressed now, it's me. I go to church in jeans and a t-shirt. I would preach in jeans and a t-shirt. There'd be a percentage of our church that would be okay with that. There'd be a percentage of our church that would say that's just Cath. I wish you'd wear a skirt, but go for it, girl. But I walked into this church, and immediately everybody just hushed and stared at me like, you're not in your Sunday best. And just that sense of feeling judged and unwelcome without anyone having spoken a word. And I know there have been other people that have been in churches and sermons been, you're going to hell, you're a sinner, just trying to make people feel bad. That's been a reality for some people. How do we move on from that, and how do we cope with that? Because I think some people have been put off Christianity by their experiences, and that's not what we're trying to do at all, but that has been some people's experience. How do we cope with church having hurt us and being difficult?
I suspect it's most people's experience that we will be hurt at some point, and I think there are two angles to come at this. And the one angle is to say that as church, as Christians, we need to hold our hands up and apologize and try to do the best we can to not hurt. But I know that there are people who have felt hurt by our church. I know that happens. So the other angle I would come at it is that my take is this. I've been hurt by churches. I've been hurt. My angle is this, that groups of human beings tend to hurt because that's the fallen nature of humanity.
Yeah.
My experience is that church is actually better than most other comparative groups.
Yeah.
So I've got a little bit of experience of other societies and groups, other clubs. I don't know what other groups people here might belong to, but it might be the golf club, it might be a football team, it might be a band, it might be a residents association, it might be an allotment association, it might be a drama group. I don't know, with all kinds of groups that people may or may not have joined with. My experience is that all of these have politics, all of these have different conflicts and issues, and it's part of how humanity works, I'm afraid, and I don't like it. But early on in my leadership of the church, I was preaching through Deuteronomy. You talk about preaching. And what you discover in Deuteronomy is that every chapter, Moses gets really annoyed with the people because they grumble and because they complain. And it really helped me to have a very low bar. So I often talk a lot about expectations. If you expect people to be irritating, you are always pleasantly surprised. If you expect perfection, you are always hurt. I think if anyone expects the church to be full of saints, to be full of perfect people, and to be full of people who are better than the rest of the world, we're going to get hurt, we're going to get disillusioned, we're going to get disappointed. One of my phrases, disillusionment comes when you start with an illusion that gets dissed.
Oh.
That's my...
Look at you as an influencer on Instagram with that, Donald. That's great.
Well, I heard somebody else say it years ago, and it's always stuck with me. The thing about approaching the church is to say, here's a group of failed people, here's a group of sinners, here's a group of people who are trying to be better than they would be if they didn't know Jesus, who are trying and aiming for something, and who are wanting to express the love of God. And sometimes we get it right, sometimes people feel in fact, a lot of times we get it right. I've been here for many, many years, in different capacities, 30 years. I stay here because it's a great church. It really is. So a lot of times we get it right, but sometimes we'll get it wrong. Sometimes we're tired. Sometimes we're irritable. Sometimes we misunderstand. Sometimes we just say the wrong thing because we're human beings. And we need people to be as gracious with us as we want to be with others. So if you're expecting a perfect church, you're going to move from church to church every 3 months, 6 months, because after 6 months you're going to find out it's imperfect. And the church is full of odd-shaped, odd people who are tricky. But it's a fantastic thing. It's a fantastic... When you see it work, when you see people who society would reject, who can be a little bit awkward, who can be a little bit grumpy, who can be a little bit sour-faced.
It's me.
When you see them blessing somebody else and encouraging somebody else. It's glorious, and I love it. I expect the church to grumble, and when they don't, it's joyful. Because people grumble in the Bible.
Yeah.
But as I say, I'm repeating myself, the other big thing for me is that any other human society that I've been a part on or observed about, whatever club I've ever been known to have anything to do with, it's far worse.
It's because we're human beings.
Yeah. But I think if somebody's watching this who has been hurt,
Yeah.
I don't want to diminish that.
Yeah.
I would want to say, we need to bring that hurt to God. We need to be honest and open about it. If there are things we can put right, we need to try and put it right. But if there are things we forgive, we need to forgive. And we need to try to move forward. We did a whole session on forgiveness, and I refer that. We need to try to move forward without holding on to hurts, without making ourselves vulnerable to further hurt. And it's a balancing act, but you move forward without blame, without bitterness. And the big thing that Jesus says is, whoever is without sin can throw the first stone. If we're convinced that we've never ever hurt anybody else, then we can throw some stones. But none of us haven't.
No.